Ricardo, here we are in the late 1990s. You're looking as fit as ever, and you're yet not able to maneuver quite as well as you would like to. What's it all about?
Well, in 1927, I noticed one day a little paralysis on my left leg and a little lack of feeling on my right leg. And in those days, they didn't have the MRI apparatus. And so they did the spinogram and the thing, and the doctor says, well, you suffered a tiny little hemorrhage, like a little pinprick on the spinal cord, and that's it. In those days, they didn't know. As the years progressed, and particularly when I was doing Fantasy Island, which were very, very long hours, I noticed that the left leg was getting a little more paralyzed and the right leg less feeling, and it was difficult to hide the limping, And finally, one day, I was upstairs waiting for dinner. My wife says, dinner served. And I tried to get up. I was reading. And I really couldn't walk too well. And I didn't know what it was. It was on a Friday night. And I told her to bring me a couple of canes, which I had had a knee operation before. And I had canes. And with those, I was able to kind of move, but very strange. Saturday was better. Sunday better. Monday, I could walk just with one cane. And I went to see the neurologist, and he says, I said, could I have done this when I fell off a horse in a picture I did with Clark Gable across the wide Missouri? And the horse threw me, and I landed on a rock. And I remember that I went through a tremendous spasm in my back. He says, no, nothing to do with it. That's how wise they are. He says, you were born with this defect. I said, what? Yeah, it's called, he didn't tell me the name then, but it's a birth defect. So he said, let's go to take an MRI. And immediately, he took me to an MRI. And 4.5 hours I was in this infernal machine, if you know what the MRI is. Claustrophobic, you feel, because this thing is, very close to you like this, and you're rigid like that, and you're going, and there's infernal noise that goes click, 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 brrr, beep, brrr, click, 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 and then brrr, for 12 minutes. How are you, Mr. Montalbán? I'm all right, All right, we're going to do a different section, and again, 4.5 hours. Finally, they brought me out, injected me with something, put me back in again, and this time, they found that it was way up here in my thoracic area, the fifth vertebra. They were looking down here because that's what I'm affected, my legs. Mm-hmm. Way up here, very unusual. That's why they couldn't find it. So he got very alarmed, and he said, you have to have an emergency angiogram of the spinal cord, he said, because this could be really serious. So they did the angiogram, and Dr. Martin said, he says, well, it's not an emergency, and you have to give your own blood, 2 pints. So in 3 days, we'll do it. Take 1 pint and another pint the next day, and then 1 day to recuperate. And then we do this examination of the spinal cord, an angiogram of the spinal cord. And he told me at the time that he thought it was a thing called spinal cavernous angioma, whatever that means. And he said, well, we can operate. And I said, well, it's about a 4-hour operation. I said, all right. He says, of course, I won't know until I get in there what it is. So he operated, and they were bringing me on the gurney to my room. And my wife and my daughter, one of my daughters, had gone downstairs to get a magazine, the hospital. And as they were, taking me to my room, I made a sound like, I was out of it. And my daughter says, Mom, it sounds like Dad's voice. And my wife, all these years, walked fast, looked at me and says, don't be ridiculous, that's not your father. Didn't recognize me. I was swollen like this with sores all over from it. The doctor came, he said, a very successful operation. We cured the thing, but in so doing, it was like a tumor of blood inside the spinal cord. He said, you had AVM, arteriovenous malformation. And he says, we had to remove the thing, correct this malformation, and you never have to worry about it again. But in removing this clot of blood, we have injured some nerves, and that's going to be a little tough for you. Well, how long was the operation? 9.5 hours.
Ooh.
that's why I was so bloated, and then my wife didn't recognize me. The only thing is when I got the bill from the anesthetist, I was looking at it and it says, lunch 1 hour. Where was I? For 9.5 hours. Anyway, it's been a slow process.
Right. And how long ago was this?
4 years ago, Paul. It was 4 years ago, and for a while I was getting, feeling pretty good. My legs were, and then now it's a little more difficult. What happens is that spinal cord has very poor circulation, and it takes time to heal. But in healing, it becomes scar tissue, and the brain sending a message to the spinal cord hits the scar tissue, which is dead tissue, and the legs don't obey. As a matter of fact, I have tremendous pain in my legs, and they shouldn't be. What happens is that the brain interprets that sensation as pain, and it's real pain. On top of that, I got the shingles, which I will have for the rest of my life. And I tell you, I'm a mess, but from here up, I'm the happiest man in the world, Paul. And I have all the energy, and I have they were going to put a transplant. No, not a transplant, an implant, intracutaneous, right under the skin, to feed the spinal cord, to block the message of pain before it reaches the brain, you see. Another way, perhaps the spasms will go away. And they had to have a thorough examination of me. And the doctor said, well, the results came back. If I showed this to another doctor and told them that this came from a 17-year-old man, they would believe me. That's how healthy you are. So I'm very healthy. It's just this incredible, spinal cord injuries are in the bottom rung of the ladder, because everything goes to heart and cancer, AIDS, I think, retinitis pigmentosa, I get something, Alzheimer's disease. But there are only 20,000 cases a year of spinal cord injury. I'm not talking about, spinal pain or back pain. I'm talking about spinal cord injury, which is what Christopher Reeve had. It was way up here, so he's paralyzed from here. And Bill Shoemaker is a dear friend of mine, a great jockey, great athlete also, from here down paralyzed. Mine was lower, so my legs. And there is no money for research, Paul, unfortunately. There's no money for research. And so they're going very slowly. They have theories that they think that Christopher Reeve could walk again. They have experimented with rats in which they sever the spinal cord and it cannot be reconnected. But in severing it, what they do is they make a bridge with the healthy nerves here and the healthy nerves here, and they make a bridge and they reconnect themselves. And the rat, which before was dragging the back legs, is walking. Says this could be done with a human being. Number one, we have no money. But if we had money, number two obstacle is that a rat is different from a man, and we cannot experiment with a man. And the nearest thing to a man is a chimpanzee. And the Society for the Protection of Cruelty of Animals says, no, you cannot experiment with chimpanzees. So all the war veterans who are sitting in wheelchairs, paraplegics, people who suffer accidents in construction, athletes and so forth, I guess that's not worth experimenting with 1 or 2 or 3 chimpanzees. So I see very little hope for us. And I would like to somehow, I've been thinking of maybe forming an organization like Elizabeth Taylor did so successfully for AIDS, and do something like that, and talk to Christopher Reeve and Bill Shoemaker and some of the athletes that are here. And then the simple man who fell in a construction job, in a wheelchair, paraplegics, and try to get money for research, because there's no money for research. Anyway, that's a long story, but I'm a man who, Paul, when I was in the hospital, those lonely nights of pain, and with a little thing that gives you a little bit of, morphine or something to kill the pain, just a little shot. And the pain was severe, and I'm still, and then I said, I started to say a prayer. I'm Catholic, and I've been saying the Our Father since I was, I guess, 3 or 4 years old. And I've been saying all these years like a parrot, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And I said, wait a minute. I'm going to say it very slowly now. And when I got to thy will be done. And I said, is this your will? Then I have two choices. One is to say, I don't want any part of you. I'll become an agnostic or an atheist or something else, if this is your will. Or I accept your will. And I thought, no, I accept your will. And what would happen if you came down to me and said, Ricardo, in spite of this, do you still love me? And I would say, yes, Lord, I still love you more than ever. And once I accepted that, this pain became less, and I've been able to accept it. Mm-hmm. Another thing that impressed me very much was the word AS. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, as we forgive. So from that moment, I decided that I was going to forgive 150% any injury that was made to me by anybody, because I want to be forgiven 150%. And so, sometimes everything happens for the best. I think I'm better adjusted, in many ways, even though my body is racked with pain. And the inability to move, I can't play tennis anymore, which I loved. But here we are. Thanks to that, I consider myself a very fortunate and happy human being.
Well, Ricardo, your philosophical view obviously is innate, and it goes back to where presumably it all started for you in your native Mexico. Is that right?
Yes and no. In Mexico, my oldest brother, Carlos, God rest his soul, who was 15 years older than I, became almost like my second father. We were three brothers and a sister. My parents came from Spain, from the north of Spain, and Castilla. And my two older brothers were born in Spain. And when my two brothers were a year and a half apart, my father was offered a good job in Mexico, better than he had in Spain, moved his family to Mexico. And then my sister was born right during the revolution. And she was born 12/12/12, the 12th of December of 1912, the day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then 8 years later, I was born. They didn't know about the RH factor. My mother had many miscarriages, many. Mm-hmm. So that was the difference in age. So my sister and I are the two Mexicans in the family. Then my oldest brother, Carlos, came to the United States and started his business. He was the first man to import Carta Blanca beer in this country. And he introduced it throughout the whole country. He started in Los Angeles, and I went to high school here, in Fairfax High School. And I had already graduated from high school in Mexico, but I needed English lit and civics and other things. And of course, to speak the language well, so that I could, because in this, my priest, very, very intelligent man, told my son, who was very slow in mathematics, and I invited the priest to have dinner, and I said, tell him about how important mathematics are, the basis for logic and everything, and science. And he said, yes. He says, your father is right. It's very, very important. But the most important subject in school, the most important of all, is English. Because it is only through English that you're going to learn mathematics and everything else. So I applied myself very quickly to learn English. They wouldn't accept me at Fairfax High School. I had to go to Belmont High School near downtown.
They wouldn't accept you because you didn't speak English?
Not very well, but So I went to Belmont, who specialized in foreigners. And it was like Babel's Tower. We couldn't understand one another. But through English, then I applied myself, and in 3 months, I was able to learn enough that Fairfax accepted me. Mm-hmm. I took public speaking so that I would be able to understand and loosen my tongue and not be afraid to answer questions when the teacher said, in English. I was always afraid. So they loosened me up. And the teacher was also the drama coach of the school. And she put me in a play called The Whole Town's Talking by Anita Loos and Ralph Emerson. And it was a small part, and I didn't like it. I said, I don't like this. I was very nervous. I didn't like it. But she saw something in me, I guess. And the next year, she gave me the lead in Tovarich, or Jacques Dubal. Prince Mikhail Uratiev, I think was my name. And once I started working on this character with her great assistance, and I went on stage, I felt something like that. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. That's what did it. A good part. Any actor, all he wants is a good part.
Right.
That was a wonderful part. And so my brother then moved his business to New York. In New York, during my vacation, I was going to go to college or try to go to college. I love the theater that I used to see. Oh my God, these great names at the time. Gene Kelly was doing Pal Joy. Talulah Bankhead was doing The Little Foxes. And I mean, it was so glamorous, this thing. And I said, gee, I would like to be a part of this, you know. So my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, got me an agent. And I started working in Soundies. Soundies was a machine, a precursor of television, in which it was a reel of about 5 numbers. Gertrude Nielsen singing My Man or something, and so on. So Nat King Cole playing something. And one of them was called The Latin from Staten Island. And the singer was Gus Van. And for some reason, they didn't like the look of the show. And Charlie O'Kern was assistant director who married Patty Page. Charlie O'Kern was a choreographer. And he said, let's put Ricardo there as the Latin from, you know. And I didn't have to say a word or anything, just play the guitar, the senoritas in the Staten Island ferry, and you know. The girl that I sort of kissed and everything was Jean Darling, who was in the original Our Gang comedies, you know.
Right.
Anyway, from that then, my agent one night, I saw him after I saw a play, and he said, Ricardo, I'm going to take you someplace to see someone. Don't ask any questions. I just got a phone call. You're going to hear the most horrible language you've ever heard, perhaps. Don't mind that. I said, no, let's go. It was about 1 a.m, you know, 12:30.
This is in Manhattan now.
Yeah, in New York. And all of a sudden we go to I forgot which hotel, very elegant, no pets allowed. The door opens and the first thing I see is a lion, pet lion. And it's Talulah Bankhead. And she's greeting my agent with the worst insults and words that I don't think I know yet. And the lion, I have brand new shoes. Said, I have money, you know, brand new shoes, and began to slobber on the beginner I was afraid of the lion. Began slobbering in my shoe, and I kicked it, and he went away. Now all of a sudden she says that so-and-so actor is playing a bit. He ruined the first act. He says we're all nervous. We had to push him off the stage. He froze, forgot his lines, and the whole thing was a catastrophe. And that so-and-so will not on, or you so-and-so, you know. I go down and finally says, Talulah, you knew her very well. How about this young man here, Ricardo, to do it tomorrow night? He says, all right, young man, as long as you don't forget your lines. And that's all I hear. Don't forget your lines. So they gave me forget my lines. They gave me the script. And all night long with coffee, you know, learning the lines, not too many. I played a croupier in Her Cardboard Lover, was the name of the
Cardboard Lover.
Her Cardboard Lover. The croupier, a small part in the first act. And all of a sudden, the young man was already dressed, who was playing the part. And he said, no, get out of that. And leave. Why? My rights? No, your rights are kaput because you didn't do your role. You ruined the first act. Miss Bankhead was very annoyed, and so get out of it. And so he got out of the thing, and then I started making up, and the young man resented me. Don't you know the first thing before you make up is to have a good shave? Well, I looked like hell. I hadn't slept all night and everything. You know, I said, yes, I thank you. You know. And finally, his clothes, and I had to put his clothes on, which would already had a little perspiration on the thing, and it was very uncomfortable. It didn't fit me very well, you know. And finally, I remember saying to me, good luck, boy, good luck. I said, but what, rehearsal? Oh, you don't need rehearsal. What? I said, no, we'll put you on the sidelines, and then when we tell you go, you go. And you will turn around and say your first line. So good luck, good luck, good luck. By this time, I'm like this, you know, good luck, good luck, good luck. First professional job on the stage. And so I go, they say, now, my entrance must have been one of these things, you know, like, because they push me. Now, and I walked and says, George, they called me around. Yes, sir. And my eyes, instead of going to the actor, went to the sidelines, and there was Talulah, and everybody like this. And I went blank. But it must have been for a second or so, because I reacted. I said my line, who had a little humor in it, and I got a very nice laugh from the audience. So I exited stage right, and Talulah was waiting for me. Young man, this is like working in France, where even the most insignificant roles are done with dignity. You will be with me for the rest of the tour. And I did, you know? And so after that, I did a thing called, I'm coming to the end now, with Elsa Maxwell, our betters of Somerset Maugham. And she thought she was going to go to Broadway with it. And she was not a very good actress, Elsa. And I played the gigolo, put little white hair. You know, I was sort of 20 years old, 21, you know, white hair. And the idea was to keep her in a very dull play, to keep this woman, who's a newspaper woman, from going to New York and printing something that had happened. They could only hold her there for the night. So they asked this man, this gigolo. And I danced the conga with her, you know. And of course, the play was kind of dull, and when this happened, and what happens, I got the notices. I got all the notices. The young man were... So then MGM was getting ready to do Tortilla Flat of John Steinbeck.
MGM was going to do this.
MGM.
Night.
And they were, oh, by the way, MGM offered me a screen test from the play, Tovarish, when I was in high school. My brother says, no, you're going to go to college, forget that. After that, and that's when I went to New York. So now MGM.
So, excuse me, Carl, so we're in chronology here.
Yes.
When you were at Fairfax High,
yes.
you attracted the eye of somebody at MGM, is that correct?
Scout. Yeah.
And were you interested in pursuing that, and your brother overruled you? Is
That's
that what
right.
happened?
I was an obedient son.
So you went to New York.
I went to New York.
Okay.
Obedient,
So now MGM is interested again?
Now MGM is doing Tortilla Flat. And they saw me in this thing with, I guess, with Talulah or something. And they asked me to do a test. And this time I took it with Lina Romay, who was the singer of Javier Cugat's orchestra. It's Xavier Cugat, as they say here, orchestra. And the two of us did a couple of scenes in the thing. We tested us. And they, very good. They were going to use Latins, because Tortilla Flat, it was, you know, the field workers here in California. Well, the Mexican actors were Spencer Tracy, Frank Morgan, Hedy Lamarr. The part that I was going to play, John Garfield played. And they said, but there are still small parts here and there, you know, maybe. And I said, well, no, thank you. And my mother was ill. I went to see her in Mexico, recuperated from a serious operation, and I decided to try my luck in Mexico City. In those days, the motion picture industry in Mexico was very, very, the golden years, talking about the 40s, you know. And so I got to Mexico, and I got a job writing copy for commercials for the Sidney Ross Company or something. And one day I was visiting a studio, and they needed one more extra in the train. He says, would you mind? I said, no, you know, you get 40 pesos or whatever it was. So, and I sat there, and I said, well, but wait a minute, what am I going to sit there like a, you know, like a mannequin? No. And I figured in my mind a little script. First is, let's see, do I have the ticket? What time do we get there? Oh yeah, that's fine. What time is it now? Look outside, I think, and the assistant director saw that I was more or less a thinking actor. And then I did a couple of bits on this and the other. And then finally, Norman Foster. I know at that time, I did a thing called 5 Were Chosen in 2 languages, because I was bilingual. Herbert Klein, who had done The Forgotten Village, was a documentary director. And he went to Mexico to do this picture called 5 Were Chosen. It was called Hostages originally. And they chose me as a young leading man to play both roles. So I would do a scene in English, and then the Mexican cast would come in, and I would do it in Spanish. With the Mexican cast, it was, you know. Now, the actors were Howard Da Silva, Art Smith, Leonid Kinski, and Frances Farmer. No, I didn't know, anything about the background. But Frances Farmer, one night, lost her mind, and she started running through the halls of the hotel naked with a seltzer water and knocking on doors and and that's when they had to bring it on a restrained, one of those restrained things, and that's when she had to go to a mental hospital. She was a beautiful woman. So then the wife of the director took her place, who couldn't act. I mean, she could, but I mean, she's not a professional actress. So the picture did nothing. But from that, little by little, I worked more and more and more and more. And then they were getting ready to do a picture called Santa, which is one of the classics in Mexican literature. And the producer brought in Norman Foster. Now, Norman Foster had directed for Orson Welles, and he directed what was it? A couple of things for him. He was very close to Orson Welles, very talented director. By the way, he had done all the Mr. Motos and Charlie Chan pictures.
Mm-hmm. So that was your second co-starring role.
Yes. Norman Foster was a very good director, and out of this, I got an Academy Award nomination in Mexico.
Oh, there's the equivalency in Mexico
the Academy
of
Award,
the Oscars
Mexico,
here.
the equivalent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, I really in Mexico. I became, my name above the title, and became a sort of, if that means a star, that's what I became, a star. But MGM, Jack Cummings, who was Louis Mayer's nephew, was going to do a picture in Mexico with Esther Williams called Fiesta. And they were looking for somebody that could play her brother, And evidently Jack Cummings told me that I was in a restaurant one day, and he said, I was paying my bill. I got up and he said, yeah, that young man, and he asked, excuse me, do you know where that young man, they didn't know. Yeah. So finally, Norman Foster, who knew Jack Cummings was looking for locations in Mexico. So I'll show you a first cut of a picture that I just did. It was called La Hora de la Verdad, the hour of truth. And Jack Cummings told me that when he saw, that's the guy. So I was offered a screen test, again, MGM, and this time I signed to a 7-year contract.
But there was no connection necessarily with that first interest on MGM's part back when you were at Fairfax High, right?
None whatsoever, no. But it was always MGM for some reason. Because they had talent scouts, you see, all over. I don't know, there's such a thing as talent scouts anymore, I have no idea. But in those days, it was wonderful because it was like a well-run institution, like a factory. It worked like a clockwork, It was wonderful. Those days were wonderful.
So then it became Fiesta with Esther Williams. That was the first of 3 pictures that you did with Esther Williams. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Fiesta that I did on an island with you. Also with Sid Charisse. I danced in Fiesta with Sid Charisse, and I didn't know how to dance. I was not a dancer. But they say, do this. And instead of doing, I would go. Yeah. So from then on, people thought I was a dancer.
So you really had no formal training as a dancer?
None whatsoever, Paul.
And how about in one of the most memorable duets in film history with Esther Williams, Baby It's Cold Outside? Did you have any, or did she have any singing training?
Esther had a nice voice. I don't and didn't. But I always thought of the song as a continuum of a scene. You see, so the song, in my mind, was part of the scene. And I relied more on the lyrics, So she and I sang Baby It's Cold Outside. It became a big hit. But in that picture, there was a picture, a song that I had to sing to Esther while dancing with her. It was called My Heart Beats Faster. And it was one of those songs where you had to hold the note, which I couldn't. So I went to the recording session of the song. Georgie Stoll was the conductor with the MGM Orchestra, which was the best orchestra, I think, in Hollywood, probably in the world, one of the best orchestras, the best musicians, Here I am in front of all these musicians, in a little, sort of like a little cubby hole made of black cloth, and then these earphones, And Georgie Stoll, when I began, he went, and I began, my heart beats faster. I could see him do, what he continued. Faster and faster at the sight of you, my heart beats faster. Anyway, so I did the thing, and about a week later I get a call. Ricardo, would you come to the studio? We're going to redo the song. This time you'll be relaxed. You will be in an empty stage with earphones. You hear the music, I'll conduct you, you sing. I say, okay, and I'm there. My heart beats faster, faster, I finished. That's good. But a little more relaxed. Sit on a stool. This is true. Sit on a stool. All right? My heart beats faster, faster. Tell you what, Ricardo. There was a sofa there. Sit on the sofa. Nice and low. My heart beats faster. Very good, but I think we can do it better. Lie down. So now I lied down on the sofa, put the microphone there. Try to yawn. Okay, now. My heart beats faster. So anyway, we finished the session, and you know what they did? They used the original track that I did in front of them. That's what they used.
After all that.
And as a matter of fact, I got sort of fan mail from that song. Strangely enough, people like the little interpretation that I gave the song, funny.
And then 2 Weeks with Love with Jane Powell, and then you're obviously making your mark, Ricardo, appearing on the cover of Life magazine, no less.
Yes, 1949, I believe. And it was Eisenstadt,
the famous photographer.
And we went all over the studio, and it was a very hot day. I had a coat on and everything. And he says, take your coat off. And I took my coat off. And I had a fountain pen in my shirt pocket. He had an eye. So he put this, I appeared with my fountain pen in my pocket. And on the cover it said, Ricardo Montalbán, Hollywood's newest romantic star, with a pocket, with a nice fountain pen in the pocket. But that was the eye he had. He did the unusual Eisenstadt. Yeah. But it was a great, for a whole week I was the toast of the town. I was invited to parties, everything, and the Life magazine was on the table, on the coffee table there, And a week later, I think it was the picture of a dog, and that was the end of my. But for a whole week, I was the toast of the town. Yeah.
But those were magical MGM days.
They were.
The old theory that there were as many stars, if not more, at MGM than there were in the skies. Seemingly everybody who was there in that era had a story about the legendary Louis B. Mayer. How about you? Did you get along with Louis B.?
Extremely well. I still today call him Mr. Mayer. He was paternal with me. He was always very caring and very. Sometimes he would invite me to his private dining room, lunch with his nephew Jack Cummings, and it was wonderful. And then later, when he left MGM, I was doing a picture in France, and I was staying at the Georges V hotel. And I go to the lobby to pick up something. Georgiana was still making up or something to go out to have lunch. And I see Mr. Mayer with Clarence Brown, who was a big director. And he saw me, Ricardo. I said, Mr. Mayer. He hugged me. I says, come, let's go around the block. Let's have a talk. And he put his arm around my arm. We walked around the block. I said, Mr. Mayer, we miss you at MGM. He says, well, it's come to a point where he called his boys and girls, my boys and girls were big stars, are being put in a big picture, and the next time it's in a B picture, and sometimes I don't like what they're doing to the star system. They were destroying it, and this we did. That was the beginning of the end of this sort of star system. Mm-hmm. And but I have nothing but the kindest words to say about the man. I've heard horrendous stories, but I've heard all this, like Mickey Rooney also respected him a great deal, and many people. And I know that Ann Miller did, and Sid Charisse. He was I liked him very much. Mm-hmm. Very much.
Now, up until this time, you had been playing pretty much musicals, and then you got into the more dramatic side, with director William Wellman in Battleground, and then you did Across the Wide Missouri with Clark Gable, My Man and I with Shelley Winters. Which is more satisfying to you, if there is a choice, Ricardo? The challenge of having done the musicals, which was really not inherently your thing, if you will, or doing drama such as Battleground, where you had a very significant role?
Doing drama is much more satisfying. But I have always felt that whether it is musical or drama, whether you're playing a villain or a saint, what the actor, I feel, has to do is play the role with all sincerity. If I want to play comedy, I'm not going to put a funny hat on, and be funny. No, then you're not funny. You play it just as seriously as if it were. There is a different timing, of course, in comedy, certainly different timing. But you let the situation be funny, and you are funnier in it if you are doing a performance as an actor. So to me, the challenge, I think the dramatic roles that are well written are less challenging than the comedies that were, sort of, I don't know, they were sort of vacuous a little bit, As a matter of fact, I memorized, because it was supposed to be a reading, but I can't read. I memorized Don Juan in Hell, the part of Don Juan of George Bernard Shaw. And you know that I memorized that more easily than some of the roles that I have to play, like some of the introductions I have to do in Fantasy Island. Who's that boss? Well, that's so and so and so. Who's like, what's a fantasy boss? Well, blah, 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 blah. And these things are more difficult to memorize than the language of Bernard Shaw, which becomes like music. Like you don't forget the lyrics very easily of songs you know, and that's Shaw. It's almost like it's a musical language. It was just brilliant. Yeah. So my career really in Hollywood has been based on ask not what the role can do for you. Ask what you can do for the role, right, thinking that perhaps I could give it a little color. Because not too many roles are written for Latins, certainly not for Mexicans. I'm a product from Mexico. When I played in films, most of the time I was an Argentinian, or a Cuban or something. Mexican didn't sound too good, and I don't know, it's very strange. Hollywood is they put you in a compartment, and it was difficult to find well-written roles for a Mexican. I had to struggle.
Lee Marvin and Anne Bancroft in Life in the Balance.
Yes.
Marlon Brando in Sayonara, right up there with the swells,
yes.
And obviously holding your own.
Trying. Yeah.
Was there more of a challenge necessarily when you're in the company of such established stars? Not that you weren't yourself, but is there more pressure, do you find?
Well, the better the actor stars or not, the better the actor, the easier it is for you. It's like when you play tennis, and I was a hack. I can't play tennis anymore, but I was a hack, and I played 3 times a week. The better the opponent, the better I played, even though he would beat me. But I'd rather be beaten by a better man than easily beating the other guy, because then I wasn't playing very well. So the stronger the response is, because actors should not be called actors, as this has been said before, but I've said it many years ago, there should be reactors. We react to conditions. You are reacting to me as I'm reacting to you, to your questions. I'm not reacting to something else. Right now I'm concentrating on your questions and I'm reacting to your questions. And so if you are a reactor, as I think we should be, the stronger the action from the other actor is, the better your reaction, you see. So it's much easier to work with pros than it is with somebody who says, oh, I can walk all over him. Steal the scene. What a terrible thing. You don't steal the scene, you give to the scene. Because if the scene works, everybody looks good. If you steal the scene, there's no scene. You're stealing it. No. Smoking in the background, doing things to cause it. No. React, in all honesty. And you will benefit, and the scene will benefit, and you will all benefit. It is in giving that we receive.
Now, some of the other female stars with whom you had the good fortune of working, Lana Turner, June Allison, Shirley MacLaine. It's pretty good working condition.
I should say. They were all very professional, and that's a joy to see, because, you know, when you call yourself a professional actor, you should act as such. I see today in the news actors who are very talented, but they don't act professionally. And that is, even in boxing, I remember Joe Louis, you know, professional boxer. And he would have tremendous left hook, and pow, short, pow. And he knocked the fellow out, and Joe Louis didn't worry him. No, he quietly went to his corner, waiting for the referee to count. And when it was over, he would just, see, he was a professional. Today, it's all showbiz. All this fight, the majority of them, you know, I'm not talking about all of them. There's some very decent men, professional fighters. But a lot of them really put on an exhibition that it is less than professional. Mm-hmm. We're losing professionalism. We're losing discipline. We're losing good manners. We're losing a lot of things that, in my opinion, are very important.
Mm-hmm. When you were honored in 1994 with the Screen Actors Guild Humanitarian Award in front of a full assemblage of fellow performers,
yes,
you were introduced by your old colleague, Anthony Quinn.
Yes.
Who introduced you by saying, in referring to the number of lover roles that you had played, that you got to break hearts, he only got to break dishes.
Yes.
An obvious reference to his role in Zorba.
Zorba, yeah.
You had a pretty good rapport, and he's a longtime friend of yours.
Yes. I've known Tony for quite a while. Yes, that's all I want to say at the moment, because things have changed a little bit.
All right. But one of the reasons I brought it up is because you had earlier, Ricardo, talked about getting put in a compartment as a performer. Recently, there was an interview with Anthony Quinn where he felt that he had to remove himself from Hollywood, as others have, because they wanted to overcome that categorizing, which was, of course, limiting. And so he went to Europe, as others have. You did not do that, but you did turn to the stage. Isn't that correct?
Yes. The reason was that 26 years ago now, I formed an organization called Nosotros. Nosotros meaning we in Spanish. Nosotros means we. So Nosotros, a Spanish word, mean we of Spanish-speaking origin. Originally, I was concerned with being from Mexico, the Mexican image on the screen. I wanted to correct it, because we're always the bandits. We were always the little hot señoritas, or the maids, or the lazy peon, you know, leaning against the cactus, sleeping. I don't know how you could do that, because the cactus has a lot of thorns. And that was the image. You see, the bandits, so Nosotros was originally to try to correct that image of the Mexicans, because you never saw really Argentine bandits, you never saw Colombian bandits, you never saw Salvadorian, Central American bandits. It was always the Mexican with the bandoliers. Even the frito bandido, who, you know, with the chips. So I called the manager, or the owner, I don't know what it was, the president of Frito-Lay. It was the president of Frito-Lay. And he answered the phone when I called. Yes, Mr. Montalbán. I said, I want to tell you something. I said, you know, this is a period here of great, somewhat like things are boiling here. The tempers are getting very bad. It was that period of great, that was when Rubén Salazar, the writer, was killed accidentally, they say, with a tear gas bullet went right through his eye or something.
What era was this, roughly?
Oh, God Almighty! This was
1980s.
That was yeah. It was everything was boiling here. A lot of demonstrations. I would say middle 70s. I would think. So 26 years ago. What is that? You know.
Right.
Anyway,
Frito-Lay, the Frito Bandido was their logo.
That's right, the Frito Bandido. And I called him and I said, sir, I won't tell you, you are going to listen to the voice of reason, because I am not a militant man, the voice of reason. And otherwise, you're going to hear from more militant groups, and sometimes they resort to violence. So please listen to me. The frito bandido is one more insult for the Mexicans in this country. Why such a cute little guy? It's the most successful campaign we've had. We invested $12 million in this campaign. It's the most successful campaign we've ever had. And I said, and the guy's very cute. And I said, precisely because it's cute, it's more insidious. I said, why didn't you make him the frito amigo? He loves the chips so much, he has to share them with his amigos, with his friends. No. You made him frito bandido, a bandit. The bandoliers stealing chips, because that is what Hollywood has portrayed us, and you bought that image. Mexican is a bandit. And he, I must say, Mr. Montalbán, I never thought of it that way. I promise you that we will take it off. And the frito bandido was taken off. I mean, I was solely responsible for eliminating the frito bandido. And so we formed the organization. Originally, it was just for Mexicans, but then other brothers, South Americans, and Spanish-speaking came. Ricardo, we too need, more opportunities, please. So then it became, that's when I called it Nosotros, we of Spanish-speaking origin, and we had all Hispanic members from different Spanish-speaking countries, and that's when we started this organization.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back to that.
But when I started the organization, they thought, because everybody was militant, that I was militant. And I guess the students were saying, that ungrateful so-and-so, he's been in this country, he's been getting good money, and now he's complaining, letting go back to Mexico. I think that was the attitude, and I couldn't get a job. Could not get a job. Besides that, I had given a whole year to forming the organization. I didn't take a job for a whole year trying to form the organization. So the most wonderful ally, almost the mother of the actor, a kind mother, is the theater. Somewhere in this big country, there's one theater that says, come. And so I did, and I started doing plays. And then I toured with Aggie Moorehead, Edward Mulhare, and Paul Henry in Don Juan in Hell by George Bernard Shaw. And we toured several places. We went to Canada, Calgary, and Edmonton. A long tour of 6 months. We ended up in New York at the Palace Theater, and I must say I got excellent review from John Simon, who was
tough critic,
quite a difficult man to please.
Right.
He ended up his review saying, thanks to Shaw and Montalbán, Don Juan in Hell may prove to be the worthiest endeavor of the 1972-1973 season.
Very good.
Those were the years, 72, 73. And so I was going by, we played in Detroit, and they were getting ready to advertise a new car that they call Cordova. Well, of course, I know the name is Cordova. My father had an agency of the brewery, Carta Blanca Brewery, in Veracruz, a place called Cordova. And I know in Spain, I've been in Cordova, it's Cordova. And they said, no, that might be the city, but this car is called Cordova. So that's it, it's Cordova. This is not a city, this car is Cordova. There is no rules in proper names to say, all right, but at least they wanted me to say Cordova. I said, no, please, at least let me say Cordova, And they said yes, and then with the soft Corinthian leather and all that, they wrote things that words that I could caress, you say.
Do us a favor, will you? Say both of those words one more time, the way they should be said.
Cordova. Yes, Cordova, yeah.
And the leather?
Well, that's right, soft, rich Corinthian leather, And so I caressed the words, and it became like a thing, And I was 16 years with Chrysler, advertising cars for 16 years.
The campaign was coincidental in its start because you were on tour with...
That's right. Because they were looking, so, hey, when they saw my performance, which was, it's a considerable amount of words in that performance. It's a big role, one of the biggest roles, It's never stops talking. As a matter of fact, the commander at one point says, He says, your flow of words is absolutely amazing, Juan. You know, the audience claps. A tremendous amount of words. And they said, they'd be a good spokesman for this. And that's how it happened. Then Aaron Spelling saw me doing the commercial, which was done with dignity, tuxedo, nice. And I said, wait a minute. He had gotten an idea. Oh, he went to ABC with several projects. And they said, well, they're nice, but we want a little more sex in it, more. What was the time that, what was it, Mary Mary, or what was the name of that show that started to be rather sexy? I forgot.
You mean the Broadway production?
It was an era there. That,
yes.
Huh?
The Broadway production of Mary.
No, on television. It was late at night. It was,
oh, yes. Mary Hartman.
Mary Hartman.
Yes.
Mary Hartman. And they said, you know, that's the tone of today. We have to. He says, what do you want? You want sexual fantasies? And he got fed up. And says, oh. And he says, on his way home, he had to stop the car. He got so excited. Wait a minute. They don't have to be sexual fantasies. How about a place where fantasies are granted? That's it. And the next day he went to the studio. He said, I have it. And they said, yeah. And they said, but we want Orson Welles or John Huston. And Aaron said, you know, the rigors of weekly television are enormous. Orson Welles was rather obese at that time, you know, and to get in and out of jeeps, and you know, and John Huston. John Huston had this a lot of coffee. He wasn't all that healthy, and you know, and television was very, very hard. How about Ricardo Montalbán? And Aaron said, I wish I could say that I had to fight for you. But the minute I said, Ricardo Montalbán said, yeah. But now, for his assistant, we want a girl with arthritis, you know, a well-shaped girl. He says, no, I want a midget. What? A midget. It's a strange island. I mean, we have to have a strange look. And he succeeded, and we lasted 7 seasons in Fancy Island. Mm-hmm. So with that and the Chrysler commercials and all that, I was able then be able to put some money away, thank God, and here I am.
But before we leave the stage, yours was the good fortune, as was hers, to appear with Lena Horne.
Yes.
Which has to be quite...
that was, you know, it was a God-sent thing for me. I appeared with Lena Horne in a play called Jamaica, written by Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg. And I was the only white member in the cast. And I played Jamaican. I had to shave all Michael's, the Spaniard hair is horrendous, you know, and to shave every week, you know, and then put this Texas dirt. It was a mess, you know. Anyway, but working with her, 2 things happened. Number one, I learned something from Lena when she sang. Economy of movement. I had a tendency always to, when she would start a song, you know, da-da-da, and one moment she would go, but, and that became enormous, that move. Economy of movement. And I have tried to learn to gesticulate or use the hands less than I used to. Sometimes you have to. In this interview, I don't know, I'm not conscious of it. I must have used them 1,000 times. But in a performance, I try to keep the hands not in my pockets, which means that the actor is very, not really concentrated in the action. It's self-conscious of the hands in the pockets. No, let them be where they are. And I've tried to do it. I learned from her that. But another blessing was that living in this country, as many other, there are certain prejudices. And this prejudice is like a little drop of water. You keep hearing about this. And you say, well, maybe there is a difference. Maybe. And I'll tell you, that working for 2 years, but it didn't take me that long, in 6 months already, the color had disappeared. Not really, because I saw the color. But I think the soul has no color, you know. And that's what happened. I judge them. There was, as a matter of fact, there was one fellow who used to bother me. He used to come when I was making up, always, and tell me all the gossip of the company. And I tolerated it. And in a way that was prejudicial in reverse. I tolerated because he was black. And then finally one day I said, listen, Please don't come to my dressing room anymore. You come to me with all this gossip. I'm not interested in gossip. Please don't. And then I felt free of any kind of prejudice. I said, that's right. I am judging a human being, not a color. And I tell you, I have such great rapport with blacks because I have many friends, black, and it was really a great. I think God again intervened. He says, Ricardo, don't let prejudice ever get into you. Judge the individual, and because of that, I think I learned that very valuable lesson, and I feel very happy about it.
So obviously, having really established yourself in television, Ricardo, playing Mr. Rourke on Fantasy Island, and the campaign of some 15 years with Chrysler and Cordoba, and a number of guest appearances, perhaps the one that is most memorable to your fans is The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek.
Yeah, I still get mail from that. It's amazing after all these years. Those Trekkies are very faithful fans. I was on my, Fantasy Island lasted 7 seasons, and this was the end of the 6th season. And 2 days later, I was working on The Wrath of Khan. They offered me the role, and when I read the script, if you read the script, the part really is rather small. But then I realized that when Khan is not on the screen, they're always talking about him. Mm-hmm. So the part becomes more important. And so I decided to do it. However, I sat down and I first read the script 2 or 3 times to familiarize myself with relationships and finding more about the character, getting to know him better, his defects, his virtues, and so forth. And it is until later that I begin to articulate the words. And so finally, I began to articulate the words, and I sounded like Mr. Rourke on Fantasy Island. And I said, the audience are going to laugh me off the screen. What am I going to do? So I asked the producer to send me a copy of the original Star Trek that I had done on television when it was a television series many years ago. It was called Space Seed, in which I played this character who's abandoned in a planet, And I played it about the 3rd or 4th time that I played it. All of a sudden, I was transported to then, what I was trying to do as an actor then. And I got full of thoughts of this man. And then what I tried to do then, it was to intensify this man more because he had been abandoned on this planet. And his wife had been killed by these horrendous animals that penetrated bugs into the ear. And so he blames Kirk for that. And his whole thing is to have revenge his wife's death, whom he loved passionately. And he has this passion now to avenge her life. So I began to read it, and to my satisfaction, at least, I thought that Mr. Rourke had disappeared. But the first day at work, you're a little nervous the first day, and all of a sudden, I hear, boss, boss, boss. And there was one of those little toys made it's like a balloon and wheels that you can electronically move, and they had dressed him exactly like Hervé Richez, And of course, everybody broke, and I broke down after a moment. The ice was broken, and then we went, and then I had Nicholas Meyer as the director, who was extraordinary. And he led me through my paces, and I trusted him implicitly. And I tell you, the picture came out, and Pauline Kael of the New Yorker, one of the most severe critics, gave me a review that is the best review I've ever had, other than Don Juan in Hell. But on film, I've never had a review. She dedicated something like almost 2 pages to me, my career, and my performance in Cannes, calling me a star of the first magnitude and so forth. Nothing happened after Cannes. I was not a star of the first magnitude to Hollywood, and here we are. But yes, that was it was a great joy for me to do it, because for 6 years on Fantasy Island, I was the perfect host. Not a wrinkle in the suit, because I knew that wrinkles were realistic. So I never, and yes, madame, and this, remember, the fantasy, once it starts, your fantasy has to continue. It's now the time to say yes or no, the same dialogue. I could never become really passionate about anything because he was a perfect host. And all of a sudden here I was doing Khan, and all he has inside is this passion for revenge, and I loved doing it. It was like taking a shower.
But there is obviously, Ricardo, a distinction for performers in doing both television and feature films. And Khan, having appeared in both, did this heighten the difference for you in doing television, a character, and then the big screen?
Well, it helped me to eradicate Mr. Rourke of Fancy Island, as I told you. We as actors, we're often asked, which medium do you prefer? And I always say, where the best part is. If you have a play and the part is not very good, and then a film and the part is not very good, and a television show, and the part is excellent, I take the television show. The play is the thing, to quote somebody who knew something about it.
Right. Well, then let me go a step further. Because of the immediacy of response, the stage is preferred by a lot of performers.
Yes.
You having had that advantage, and particularly doing that lengthy tour with Don Juan in Hell, would you consider that among the more gratifying times of your career?
By all means. Don Juan in Hell was the most satisfying experience that I've ever had as an actor. Immediate response. That's wonderful. Now, the only thing is that you only live in the minds of those people who saw you. It's a limited audience. Mm-hmm. Whereas in film, there it is. It's a testimonial to good or bad acting that you've done, but there it is. The theater, and also the night after night when you don't feel well, where the voice is, when you're having a little cold. The theater is very demanding, but in being very demanding, it's also the most satisfying. Yes. Yes. And now the thing that I like about television, or motion pictures, in television, there's no time to waste. The pace. In film, sometimes, by the time they like the scene and the thing, and you do one take, and then go back and have a cup of coffee or a cookie or something. That time to me is, I want to get going with it. It's the only thing I don't like about films. But I like the care that is taken in films and the rehearsals where you grow. That's a wonderful thing, which you don't have the luxury on television.
Now, doing the road show, particularly that ambitious tour of Don Juan in Hell, meant you were away from home for quite a while.
6 months the first time, and then I did it again later on with one-night stands. 138 cities in 6 months by bus with Myrna Loy, who never complained. There was a professional, a pro, Edward Mulhead and Kirk Kastner, and I. 138 cities in 6 months. I don't know where I was. And sometimes we just barely made it to the theater because the distances were enormous. And the truckers have this little thing saying the fuzz is, nearby, we slow down to about 45, 50, 60. Otherwise, let's go 100 miles an hour. Otherwise, we couldn't make it to the next. And sometimes we got from the bus right to the theater and put the tuxedo on and don't want to it's wonderful. It's like, like the old actors in vaudeville or something. It was a wonderful experience,
That, of course, is not only demanding of you personally for the moment of the pressure that you just described, but being away from wife and family that long, yours being one of the enduring marriages in our business.
Yes, indeed. And I owe it all to my wife, who is totally devoted to me as a wife, to her children as a mother, and to her home. She's a homemaker, which is probably the greatest thing for me. This is my little castle. It's a home. That's what you work for and everything. And she makes it immaculate and wonderful, and she's totally devoted. And while I was away for 6 months, she had to be mother and father and deal with all the problems at home. She's been, the guiding star of my life. She's been the Rock of Gibraltar. She's been my best friend, my severest critic, and also the biggest applause I may get from her. She's very, very level-headed and she's an honorable, faithful, remarkable, and beautiful woman. And today I love her much more than when we first met, and it was oh, I love you, my dad, the romanticism, because marriage is a difficult vocation. And you go through different periods, You go through periods, and then, and it's not a big thing, it's the little things, the annoying things that get you, who needs this, But they say, no, it's for better or for worse, till death do us part. And you continue, and then you reach a higher level. Yeah, it was better than before. And then nothing stays like that or like that. Everything is, But right now, I'm like that. She's been, particularly since this thing happened to me, no doctor, no nurse, nobody could take care of me the way she has. She's really, as I said, the guiding light of my life. I love her with all my heart.
How many years have you been married?
My wife doesn't like to say that. In America, that is, getting older is unforgivable.
Right.
She will not tell you her age, but I was 23 when we were married, and she was about 6 years younger than I, so you can imagine.
All right. And your children, there are 4 of them?
Children, we have 4 children. We had girl, boy, girl, boy. And
was that designed?
It was designed. It depends if you eat tortillas or don't eat tortillas. Just before conception. No, and we had girl, boy. And then now we have 6 grandchildren, and it's just wonderful. The grandchildren have great satisfaction without the responsibility,
Yes.
Oh, you're beautiful, my baby. So it cries, here, have him, to the mother, Whereas before you have to base with them and everything. No, it's wonderful. I mean, my life has been, from that point of view, very complete. I love my kids. I think the kids love me. My grandchildren, I love them, love me. My wife. I mean, I'm a very lucky man. Very lucky.
Now, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Ricardo,
Yes.
because at the time you were honored with the humanitarian award. Your wife, Georgiana, and I believe one of your daughters
Yes,
was
Anita.
there. Anita. And you told a story about an occasion where you had gone to a dinner party and there was an attractive young lady who was...
Yes.
Tell us about that, if you will, just to show the human side of marriage.
Georgiana has a wonderful sense of humor, thank God. Thank God. Very important, And as I say, in the little things which she becomes annoyed. In the big things, she's tremendous. But anyway, we came to this party, and we arrived arm in arm, and all of a sudden, Georgiana, somebody I haven't seen in so long, how are you? And Ricardo, and we were separated with that group, and I went to this group over here with friends. How are you, Ricardo? Was everything fine? We're talking. And all of a sudden, this young girl, to whom nature had been very generous, and she knew it, and she dressed accordingly, approached me with a certain look in her eye. And I must say that I guess I was flattered, and she goes, hello, Mr. Montalbán. Oh, hello, how are you? And we start talking, she starts talking to me and everything. And also, I don't know why, but my eyes were drawn that way. And there, across a crowded room, was the lovely, beautiful face of my wife with a disgusting look. And I said, uh-oh, here we go again, one of those. So I extricated myself as well as I could from that situation with the young girl. And I joined my wife. I put my arm around her waist tentatively, and she accepted it. I said, well, this is not as bad as I thought. It's going to be all right. Dinner, okay. Goodbye. Hostess, friends, goodbye. My arm around her, walked to the car, opened the door for her. She sat down, closed the door. I walked around. I tipped the fellow of the car, opened the door for me. The minute I closed the door, the minute. So you think you're pretty hot stuff, right? What do you mean? What do you mean? I say, I saw you there with that girl there, cheap girl, dressed like to cause attention, and you were flat. You'd be pretty hot stuff. I said, honey, baby, what could I say? The girl comes, and then I can't say, I'm sorry, I won't talk to you. I mean, the poor girl. And she says, no, you don't know. But listen to me, she said. When one day, says, you're on a wheelchair with your head tilted to one side and the saliva dropping out of it, do you think that girl would wipe out the saliva and straighten your face? And no, she wouldn't do it. I will do it. Until the day you die, I'll do that and everything. And somehow that struck me very funny, and I started to laugh. And then she saw the humor of it when I laughed, and that was the end of the thing. But I'll tell you something. If today, I'm not in a wheelchair, but I'm on a walker, but if I were in a wheelchair and my head were turned to one side and the saliva would be dropping, Georgiana would be there to wipe it out and straighten my head and take care of me, as she always has.
Good.
Yes.
Was there, that you referred to earlier, an on-the-set accident that the doctor, I believe you said, was not related at all to this inherent problem that you had, but was there a debilitation?
Yes, in 1949, I did a picture of Clark Gable across the White Missouri. I played an Indian. Of course, we had to play Indians. As a matter of fact, the ironic part of it is that I won an Emmy playing an Indian in How the West Was Won, which today you couldn't do because it's politically incorrect. I mean, Indians should play Indians, Mexicans, and there are not too many roles for Mexicans or Indians. But in those days, I had to make a living, and I was allowed to play Frenchman. I played even a German on live television. I played Greeks, Italians, because I speak Italian. It was all right. Now it's iffy, American actors can play Mexicans, however. For some reason, that's not. But I don't know. Anyway, we won't go into that. But I was doing this picture playing an Indian. William Wellman was directing. Clark Gable, the star. And I was warming up this horse, riding bareback. And with just not even a halter, because a halter it was just a piece of rope tied on, in the bottom part of his mouth, yeah. Just a piece of rope, kind of short. So you look wild. And I did have kind of a wild horse. But I owned 3 horses in Mexico before I came here. I felt comfortable on a horse. But somehow this guy was, jumping. And I said, God, I have to work with him tomorrow. I'm like, Lord, I better get used to him. And so I run, and I let him run. And then I would stop him and jump. And then finally I saw an incline, kind of gentle. I said, okay, now you want to run, now let's run up there. And when we got up there, he was really puffing. And finally I quieted him down, and it was quiet. And he started to munch on the grass, but this little rope was very short, and I was very uncomfortable. He couldn't reach his head. So I sat sideways on the horse, and he was munching. And all of a sudden, I was watching the shooting a scene way below there. And a cannon explodes, and the horse takes off, and I lose the rein, and I'm sitting sideways, and I fell on top of a flat rock. And I sort of passed out, and the horse came by himself alone, and they said, "Gee, that's the horse that Ricardo was riding. Let's look for him." And they found me there, and they took me it was in Durango, Colorado, to a little hospital, very clean, wonderful little hospital. I'll never forget it. And what I had suffered was a tremendous spasm in my back. Anyway, I finished the picture under very adverse conditions with enormous pain with the spasm. And when this thing happened to me, I attribute it to the fall from the horse. But this neurologist, when I told him the story, he says, no, it had nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do with it. You were born with a defect. How does he know that? I have no idea. Brilliant man. And that's when I took the MRI, and sure enough, I had a malformation from birth. But I thought it was because of the fall from the horse, you see. All these years, and it wasn't that did it.
Right. Ricardo, in the pursuit of political correctness, given that which you represent, is it Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, Hispanic American? What is the proper way to describe?
I really am at a loss for words because I am an American citizen. I'm an American. But by birth, I'm a Mexican. I'm very, very honored. I'm very proud to have been born in Mexico, a country that I love very much. As indeed I love the United States. And if I may digress, I told in an interview once something that it came to mind now. I said that when I was a young boy, and a friend from school, I would bring a friend from school, 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, to play marbles, in my little hometown, Torreon, in the north of Mexico. And I liked this kid. We got along very well. And when he left, if my mother would say, I congratulate you, Ricardo. You have chosen a very nice boy as a friend. That's good. And the next day when I went to school, if this kid would say, Ricardo, your mother is wonderful. She's very nice. I was so full of joy. And something like that has happened to me. Mexico is my mother. The United States is the best friend I've ever had. Sometimes you even leave home to go with a friend, you know. Best friend I ever had. And I really dream of the day when my mother, Mexico, would say, Ricardo, you chose a very nice friend. And the United States, my best friend, would say, Ricardo, your mother is sensational. I dream of that day. But that won't happen for quite a while. It's beginning to happen a little bit. Hollywood could help a great deal and really hasn't done too much work in that direction of the two countries being, friends, being neighbors. There should be one of friendship and common respect and love. Love, yes, love. Mm. Love.
Ricardo, which better describes your reaction in terms of minorities' progress, not only in that which you feel has been limited in Hollywood, but nationally? Some gratification that there's been progress made, or frustration that there hasn't been enough?
Well, you know, Hollywood is a strange phenomenon. At one time, the studios had talent scouts, and it was run, as I said, very professionally. They went to even grammar schools to look at an incipient talent, perhaps. It was run like a magnificent organization that's preparing for the future. You know, today I talked to Carol Lindley a few years ago. She had just come back from New York, where she had been doing a talk show, and she came back and said, "Ricardo, I'm back here, but who's in charge? Who's in charge?" I don't know who's in charge. In those days, Louis B. Mayer was in charge, and Warner, and on. So Hollywood, for some reason, has always had support groups. I think at the very beginning, the Jewish people were persecuted throughout the world and everything, and they started the motion picture industry. I think they were supportive of one another, as well as you should be. Then after that came the liberals and ultra-liberals. That was a very strong group that they supported. It was a support group for them. And they worked together and they helped one another. To the far right, there wasn't really that much, only the John Wayne and John Ford. But that didn't last that long, and it wasn't as big a group as the liberals. There's always been a support group. Then came the blacks. The blacks had done tremendous inroads thanks to supporting one another. It's very important to have support groups. Go ahead, to encourage you. Go forward. Come on. A support group you need. I think that today the homosexuals are also being very supportive of one another. The Mexican or the Latin, for some reason, we're very individualistic. We're very individualistic. And just now we begin to be supportive. Before we didn't quite, we didn't pull together because we're very individualistic. As a matter of fact, I was doing Sayonara in Japan, and I was talking to a captain who told me that in the jungle, the most feared fighters that the Japanese fear the most were the Mexican soldiers, because they had a tremendous sense in the jungle, tremendous sense of the individuality, and they were the best jungle fighters. He says, however, when it came to time to walk on unison, they were the worst, he told me. So, I mean, that's funny, but it does show that we are very individualistic. And that is a great asset, but not when you're trying to open these doors of opportunity. And for the first time now, we are beginning to really be supportive of one another. You need support groups. I'm talking about the minorities. They need support groups. The Asians are beginning to have a good support group. For some reason, I wish, like I said, to me, there's only one race, and that's the human race. I wish we were all were together like brothers and sisters and love one another, and we didn't need support groups or anything. Just your talent alone, was sufficient, But that's Hollywood, in my opinion, huh? Now, I'm talking like I'm an authority. I'm not, Paul. You asked me my candid opinion, and that is my candid opinion. I may be totally wrong.
Knowing how humble you are and don't wish to be embarrassed by an enumeration of all of the awards you've received, so trustfully our viewers will understand that you have been connected for some time with a lot of charities. I think most people who are compelled to give to charity focus themselves in a particular area, as you had in the founding of Nosotros. But you have been involved in so many charitable undertakings. What is it that drives you to be that vast in your involvement?
You know what I think did it for me? Although I always felt that I had to contribute something, give something back. I always felt that. But the thing that really did it for me was to put my deeds where my mouth is. And that was at the time of this, the period I'm talking about, of rebellion and disruption. And remember the political
talking about the 60s,
upheaval,
no?
And that was a sign. Power. Mm-hmm. And also I thought to myself, wait a minute, what can you do with a closed fist? You can only hit. You can only destroy. You cannot build anything with a closed fist. You have no fingers. I think it's time for us to do this. Let's join hands, Let's join hands. Let's help one another. And become really brothers, under the fatherhood of God. Brothers here. And I think that's probably what convinced me that when anybody calls me about anything of be it retinitis pigmentosa or cancer or paralysis or AIDS or anything, I've always said, now's the time to prove that you mean what you say. And here I am, here are my hands. Let's help one another. I think that has been very important in my life. The difference between this and this. This is creative. You can create. With this, you can only destroy. And I think those days are over, I hope.
Right. But isn't it quite a juggling act for you, Ricardo, of being a devoted husband, father, grandfather, still pursuing showbiz, your inconvenience of your disability, and yet wanting to contribute to all these charities? How do you keep that many objects in the air at the same time?
Well, there were times when I was feeling sorry for myself. I really, because, this July 7th, 4 years ago, this operation took place. So 4 years is a long time. There are times when not now, but I hit a little depression, And all of a sudden, I think of my friend Bill Shoemaker and Christopher Reeve.
Bill Shoemaker, the jockey who sustained a debilitating injury of the neck.
Yes.
Thrown from a horse.
No, it was an accident.
Yeah, forgive me. Yes, he had an earlier one where he was thrown from a horse.
Yes, and he recuperated from that one. The doctor says, you will never ride again.
Right.
And Bill says, yes, I will. And he did.
And then he was in the automobile accident.
That was the automobile accident. So, all of a sudden, I was talking to Neil Papiano, who is my lawyer, who represented me against this case I had against Colombia, which we settled out of court. And I told him, I said, he represents Bill Shoemaker also. And I said, this pain that I have, this pain. He says, is Bill in pain? He says, no, Christopher Reeve or Bill Shoemaker, no pain. But you know what, Ricardo? They would give $5 million to feel pain, because it means that they're feeling something. It's feeling. And that's why I'm able to walk with a walker, because I still have feeling. But when you are paralyzed from here down, there's no pain, but there is very little hope that they'll walk again, unless we get the money and a couple of chimpanzees, which seems impossible. But there's always somebody worse off than you are. And I have seen people much worse off than I am, so cheerful and so wonderful. I mean, Christopher Reeve it was an inspiration to me, an inspiration to me. And so I don't feel sorry for myself anymore. On the contrary, I say, thank you, God. Maybe, you see, this preparing me better. I do believe in the hereafter. And this is preparing me for a better life. It really is. It really is, Paul.
Ricardo, of interest to our viewers is in this milieu of charitable undertakings and voluntary services that you've given was your service as an elected member of the board of directors at Screen Actors Guild, which was back in the 60s, wasn't it?
The first time I served was on the president, say twice, President Reagan. For the first one. Then I went through, I guess, Dana Andrews and George Chandler and so forth, and finally ended up with, I think, with John Gavin. I was, I think, about 12 years or something like that.
Yes.
About 12 years I served on that post. And, you know, I accepted because it's a great honor to be named to represent our brothers, our fellow actors. But I recognized, although I became at one time second vice president and everything, and it wasn't because my work was so brilliant in all those areas of Robert rules, which I'm not very good at parliamentary procedures or contracts, figures, and I think my contribution was in the humanities. I think in humanizing some of the rules and taking into consideration the which is almost the microcosm of the world. In Hollywood, we have actors from every part of the world, and to bring into it more of the human aspect of our contribution to the Screen Actors Guild. I think that was the area in which I was most concerned, and the area in which I think I served with a modicum of effect, I guess. Yeah.
Well, at that time, one of the various incarnations of merger between the Guild and our sister union, AFTRA, Ronald Reagan, during his presidency of the Guild, was pushing for it. It was not successful, which is not an indictment of him any more than the current attempt at the merger has been going on since 1980. Do you have any perspective on this at all?
I don't know. I don't know what to do. I mean, we're all actors. I belong to AFTRA. I belong to Equity. What is the difference? Of course, the working conditions may vary. So if I'm working on a picture as opposed to a television, a film production as opposed to tape, I suppose the conditions are different, so we have to be guided by different rules. But I think perhaps we could embrace both. I really do. I wouldn't be against that. We're all actors. My God, we're a special group of people who love our profession. I remember in the Guild, the one thing that was difficult was that, you know, in any other profession, you talk to people and say, oh boy, next year I'm going to retire. Oh, thank God, I'm going to go fishing. Actors don't want to retire. They want to work until they drop dead. I mean, we're a very special group of people in that sense. So I think it could be a merger with some modifications, naturally, because the needs of one differ a great deal from the needs of the other one, you know. So it would be a little complex compromise, but I really think we should join forces. I really do.
Right. During your era on the board of directors, it was made up principally of established, recognizable performers. It is certainly much different than that today. I think perhaps, Ricardo, a representation of the change of the business. Most of the people who are on the boards today of either union are not of the same visibility as you were and Ronald Reagan and others. Do you think that this is a lack on the part of some of the successful people today of not making a contribution to the union that has helped to give them the conditions that were so favorable?
That was very hard for me to judge, Paul. Very hard for me to judge. I think that today some of the big stars are, they travel so much. They live in different parts of the country. They had a principal home in New Jersey or someplace, or in New Haven or whatever it is. Before that, we were more concentrated here in Hollywood, all the big stars. There was a greater concentration here. Today it's so spread out. They're working in Europe, they're working here, independence, location. We don't seem to have the nucleus like we used to have at one time. Perhaps that's the reason. I'm just thinking, from the top of my head. But if that is the problem, I think part of it is that. Before, Hollywood was our home. Beverly Hills was our home. Now they're buying homes all over the country, and there's no. And for him to say, "Or are you going to serve so many years as a president?" That means that I can go. I have to be here, and I think perhaps that's one of the main reasons why some of the major actors don't want to commit themselves to be limited to just living here. Perhaps, Paul. I don't know.
One of the changes that has been so significant at the Guild is the formation of various categorical committees, if you will. The EEOC, the Women's Committee, the Children's Committee, and there's a committee for the disabled, an opportunity for those who have some disability to be seen in a light where, if possible, why not cast that person despite their disability?
Absolutely. A man who has lost the use of his limbs doesn't mean he's lost one bit of his talent. On the contrary, I think that I speak personally. I mean, my legs are not too usable. I couldn't walk. I would have to walk with 2 canes or at least with my walker. That has intensified in me the human aspect much deeper than before, and because of that, I think that I am able to express more fully as an actor than if I had 2 good legs and I was playing tennis and everything. I really think that, in a way, that makes you a better actor. To suffer, to be suffering, and to, the paraplegics. My God, I mean, it's all here. They say that when a person goes blind, that the other senses come to the aid and become more acute. The sense of feeling, the sense of hearing. And I think when you lose that ability, like the paraplegics, to move, I think this becomes more acute and more intense and more intelligent and more feeling and more productive. And it is a shame that they are ignored. I did the Chicago Hope, for instance. I was in a hospital, so I could be in a bed, on the side of the bed, getting dressed or something, and then leave in a wheelchair. But how many Chicago Hopes are there for the person that is in the days of Raymond Burr? I guess they're over. They don't think. It is a shame. I would think that perhaps we could form an organization with Christopher Reeves and Bill Shoemaker and some of the athletes that have suffered, who are paraplegics from football, and so forth. And the simple man, I say, that is falling off, during construction work or something. And we could form something like Elizabeth Taylor so successfully has done with AIDS. I don't see why we couldn't join hands and raise funds that way by the visibility of and interviews of Shoemaker and Christopher Reeve and I and athletes. So why couldn't raise funds like that? Because the government has no money for spinal cord injuries. So I would like very much to do that. And I think Hollywood could be so helpful if they wanted. They could be so helpful in saying this man has a physical disability, but it's not a mental disability. This man has a fortune to offer through his brain, through his interpretation, through his pain. Why can't Hollywood be more? But Hollywood, I've given up. Hollywood is not an altruistic society. Hollywood is the motion picture business. Motion picture business. If paraplegics made money at the box office, every picture would have paraplegics. Hollywood is not concerned as a whole. I don't say everybody. Generally speaking, there's new producers and so forth. All they want is, pictures are so expensive now that all they want to worry about is, let's get so and so and so, money. No, let's be helpful to people who need help. And very seldom that happens. It happens, but very seldom.
Given that which you were just recognizing, Ricardo, the big money, the multi-millions that are guaranteed to a star, which has caused what is described at the Guild as this salary compression, that the former character actor now forced to take scale for a daily or a weekly performance, and yet all this money is going to the stars. Do you have a view on that at all?
Well, I think that, if we believe in a democracy and in a capitalistic society, I guess there should be no limit. The sky is the limit to what you could do. But I think that then the conscience of man should take over and say, look, instead of 10 million, give me 7. I mean, 7 million is a pretty good amount of money, And let the other 3 million go to the other fellow actors who are. I think there should be some kind of compensation, to compensate, I'm talking about. I don't resent the man who makes $10 million, I don't resent it, but I do feel sorry, as you say, for the character actors who are forced to work for, as you say, for minimum salary. There is something not right there. But there is something not right in some of the professions where they make millions and millions and millions, and a great professor, like I know one who died recently, graduated from Harvard, summa cum laude, and he retired with a meager pension, and a little health and welfare, little nothing. This man who was framing the minds of the future, how valuable that. My father used to say that the best paid public servant should be the teacher and the policeman, to attract the best people, the best police department, well paid, so they don't have to be tempted by bribe or anything like that, and teachers to attract the greatest minds and pay them handsomely so they can prepare the society. We don't see that. We don't see that. We see athletes getting, millions and millions and millions, playing a game. Because what? Because it's a popular game and makes money. So our values are a little bit out of proportion. Again, I repeat, no, I don't resent a man making anything he can make. But if that means that our fellow actors are working for peanuts, then it does seem to be a little bit inhuman, in my opinion.
Ricardo, as you look back over your life, both professionally and personally, it's been a pretty good run.
It has been, Paul. I've been, the best thing that happened to me from the very beginning was to have a father and a mother that were exemplary. Because I don't like that saying, do as I say, don't do as I do. It's a cop-out. I think the greatest teacher is example. And we are example from my parents that is unequaled. Then coming to this country and being accepted, because I've been accepted always by the public. No, before that, I must say, the marriage to my wife, which really has been the most important part of my life, and the birth of each one of my children, grandchildren. And then the generosity of the United States of America, my country now. This thing that happened to me, I think it's a small price to pay for all the joys that I've had and all the good fortune, the good luck. Because in acting, there's a lot of, it's a lot of where you are at a certain time that gives you the jobs, Agents, as a rule, are merely an answering service. They're not creative agents like they used to have in the old days. So that I've been very, very fortunate with all this. On top of that, being that there are not enough roles written for Mexicans or Latins. Look at the career I've had. I've been acting since 1941. I did play with Talulah Bankhead. 1941. Since then, I derived my livelihood solely from acting. And here we are. It's 1941, 56 years later. And I can still function vocally. I do voiceovers. I do this. I do a lot of public announcement service, for charity and so forth. I try to keep active, and because it's important that way I forget about myself instead of sitting feeling sorry for myself, to be doing something. So yes, it's been a very, very, I consider myself very blessed and very fortunate man.
Was there any role or any production that represents a disappointment to you because you didn't get it? Is there still something that ideally you would like to have performed, some character, some show?
Well, I had only 2 examples. I don't know if I should mention the pictures because, but I did, well, yes, I'll mention the pictures, nothing to do with anything. I did a picture called Sayonara with Marlon Brando, in which I played a kabuki actor. And I trained assiduously. I mean, the most difficult movements, the few movements I had to perform was the most difficult thing I've done in my life. I mean, you have to be no, that's wrong, because this finger should be there, and this should be parallel with this one, slightly curved. And this finger should be not there, but right there. And this should be right by the nipple there. And all this should be, and then, I mean, that's just to begin with. Now make the next step. It was the most difficult thing I've done in my life. I did Sayonara. They saw the final product. They took it on previews, and evidently the cards were very favorable to me, because they had seen before an American falling in love with a Japanese, but they had never seen an American woman falling in love with a male Japanese, And so that was intriguing. And I had some lovely, very sensitive scenes with Patricia Owens. And the cards evidently favored me quite a bit. Well, and Josh Logan said, Ricardo, don't even tell anybody about this. Let it be a surprise. You're going to get a nomination, at least. So I have a letter upstairs from Josh Logan. It says, due to circumstances beyond my control, your part now had to be cut considerably, and some of your finest moments and in the cutting room floor, and now the studio won't get behind you for the nomination. And indeed, I was not nominated. That was a grave disappointment. A picture called Blue with Terrence Stamp. Again, I played a man who was like a bandit, but a little bit insane, with his sons. And I had a couple of scenes in which he's been drinking. And we got to see the picture. I tell my wife now, this is the part where I'm a little drunk and I gone, that scene. Wait a minute, well, but still another scene in which I'm in a cave, sitting down. And now my mind is turned kind of around, and it's almost insane at this point. And I'm gone. So I remember at the time Silvio Narizano directed the picture. And during a lull, because we're waiting for the clouds, I had already finished my part because Terrence Stamp had to learn a Texas accent. And he asked me, do you mind doing your part first? We'll do your part first. So he has a chance to learn the Texas accent. And I said, not at all. I'm prepared. So I did all my part. And he comes to me. I was supposed to make an entrance into town, my horse. And he walks all the way from the camera to me because the clouds were not allowing us to film. And he said, Ricardo, you're going to get a nomination from this. Now just think, it's already in the can, your performance. Now we have to worry about doing the rest of the picture, and Terrence has to worry about you. This is it. I arrived at Paramount. Bob Evans got out of his car when I was 1 minute. Ricardo, nomination you're going to get for this. And then we saw the finished product and the drunk scene and everything. How it happened, I don't know. But again, I ended on the cutting room floor, and my part became totally inconsequential. Those are the heartbreaks that all of us have suffered from time to time. But you are a pro. There was a dance director called Jack Donahue. He was a wonderful man. And when I first arrived from Hollywood, he saw in me a sort of a naive, here I am in Hollywood, and there's Clark Gable and Lana Turner. I mean, the commissary and MGM was incredible. And there is Hedy Lamarr, and there's Spencer Tracy, and there is Lionel Barrymore, and there is Elizabeth Taylor, and Jane Powell. And, I mean, heaven. I died, I went to heaven, And he saw that in me. He says, Ricardo, he says, don't get too... He says, remember, a boxer, when he's in the ring, and the first round is over, comes to his corner, and he doesn't say to his seconds, gee, that guy is beating the life out of me, trying to beat the life out of me. No. He doesn't complain. He knows what he's there for. So be like a boxer here. This is a cruel business. It can be very cruel. You're going to receive a lot of punches and a lot of disappointments. Don't discourage. Always go forward. Go to the next round with a better attitude. Defend yourself more, but never give up. And that advice at a fairly tender age and everything sort of guided me very much through these difficult times.
Right. But let me just harken back to with no less than Josh Logan telling you that it was an outstanding performance, and yet it was beyond his control that some of your better scenes were edited.
Yeah.
And Robert Evans, the producer of another picture, telling you, hey, it's nomination time. Presumably they meant it at the time.
Yes.
Then what is it? Is it in the eye of the editor? Is it the producer exerting his
I don't know what
position?
it is. Maybe it's the length of the picture is too long. Let's cut. You're not going to cut Marlon Brando. Any scenes of Marlon Brando. Let's cut me. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not going to cut Terrence Stamp, Joanna Pettit, or in the picture there with the stars. This guy, we can do without that scene. The picture's too long. Maybe. I hate to think that it was somebody who says, look, he's taking too much attention from the thing. Maybe it's better to... I don't know. I'd rather think that it was not the reason. I'd rather think that it was because maybe the pictures were a little too long and something had to be cut, perhaps. What I would tell an actor who wants to be a star, I say, don't try to be a star. Try first to be a good actor. And prepare yourself. Take this business with all seriousness. You know, Bobby Lewis used to say that every performance should have feck. And then Kirk Hasner said, no, also a nail. Let's put a nail there. Feckle. Every performance should have truth, humor, energy, clarity, and love. Love your profession. Be willing to sacrifice many things for it. If you're not willing to sacrifice, don't enter this profession. Because the Screen Actors Guild would tell you that out of 73,000 members that we are or something, the actors that make $0 to 999 is something like 58% or something like that. It's unbelievable. The odds are against you. You must love it with a passion. If you're not going to love this with a passion and dedication and professionalism, don't. Then you're in for the terrible disappointment. You may hit it lucky, but then if you hit it lucky, to maintain yourself there, it's another very hard thing to do. So it's a very difficult profession, and only if you have a passion for it. Otherwise, forget it.
Ricardo, as you look back, do you think that point you just made, that establishing your career was as difficult as maintaining it?
Yeah, I think that you can get a break. I think that might happen if some young actor is very good looking, you know, blonde, blue-eyed or something, or black, handsome man. He might get a break. He might get a break. But where does he go from there? I was thinking of a performance that just floored me. Billy Joe Thornton, is it?
Billy Bob Thornton.
In Swing
Billy
Blade.
Bob.
In Swing Blade. You know, I enjoy histrionics, but I know how histrionics are done. And then I enjoy the naturalness of the simplicity of art, which to me was Spencer Tracy. I used to sneak in the sets when he was, and I watch him rehearse, and how he evolved the character, and yet with such ease. And I can't do that, but I know how it's done. But what this man did in Swing Blade, I don't know how that's done. This is a man who had the same kind of tone of voice and said, for instance, he said, no, coffee makes me nervous. And he said that several times, and yet every time it meant something different. And it was an internal acting that was so strong that it came through here and communicated with us. And I don't know how that is done. I have no idea. Because it would have been a very monotonous performance, because it was a monotony. This guy. It was his thinking out loud that came across that screen. And that, at my age and the experience I've had, I don't know how that's done. I don't know how it is done. The rest I know how. I can't do it, but I know how. how it's done. This one, I don't know. It floored me. Now, where is he going to go from there? I'm anxious to see. I'm anxious to see. Because, you know, once you hit that peak, I hope it's not his peak. I hope it will go on and on and on, higher and higher. But if there is a peak, then there's going to be a little descent, and then maybe up again. So it's very difficult to maintain something on the same level when you hit a great role. Yul Brynner lived off The King and I for the rest of his life. In my opinion, Yul was, forgive me for saying this, Yul, but a little bit of a posing one-note actor, you know, looked magnificent with it, you know. But I didn't see too much variety in the man. But it was always The King and I, The King and I, The King and I. And for the rest of his life, because of that one role, he was able to capitalize on it. Although some of his work later on wasn't really all that. It was now The King and I. It was here someplace, you know. And it's very difficult to maintain something. I did a retreat once in a retreat house, a Catholic retreat house, the exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. And the retreat master said, all right, in this retreat, in which you observe silence for 3 days, and it was in silence that you get to know people better. Amazing how words get in the way. And he said, what we're going to do in this retreat, we're going to build a house. The first thing we have to do is find a good foundation to build a house, strong, that no earthquake can destroy, strong. Then we are going to design the shape, and then we construct it with all the stresses and forces against it. And then we make it, and finally we make a house that we can be proud of. But now, and then we beautify it and do it. But now comes the most difficult thing of all, is the maintenance of that house, to maintain it at that level of perfection, cleanliness. So maintaining something sometimes is much more difficult than getting a good break.